Homo erectus us, his long, smooth, hard brain case, his brooding bad boy brow ridge, his flowing blonde hair, his piercing blue eyes, his high German accent. Scientifically, he is the most bangable European ancestor. I am Roger Pearson, and welcome to Channel 4's Naked Attraction Race Science Edition.
Nice.
Welcome to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Hey.
All right. Glad we got that out of the way.
Yes.
Woof. Every time. Every time. You gotta
You
switch
have
it
a
up.
problem with these introductions.
Well, yeah, I get bored easily. You know, I'm a child of the 80s. I smoke a lot of weed. that kind of thing, you know. But yeah, we're back. We're here talking about Roger Pearson once more, the second and final episode of the Pearson saga.
You were thinking to make it 3 parts, I think, no?
Well, maybe. Maybe I was
I
worried.
think he's reconsidered it.
I think I was worried that it would be 3 parts, but no, we're just gonna wrap this guy up. The thing is like I never really fell in love with him. You know, I never really like.
You think I fell in love with Carto?
But in the sense that, like, I fell in love with, like, you know, our character versions that we do of, like, David or Dick Butt. You know what I mean? And, like, okay, I like this Roger Pearson a lot now. I feel better about him now. But still, he's not a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
He just never will be.
Racist David Attenborough kind of voice. I don't know.
Yeah.
So he's dead, right?
Oh, yeah. Big news. Thank you, Patreon.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. One of our patrons went ahead and did the legwork there and figured out that Roger Pearson is, in fact, dead and died in January of this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which tells you a lot about his influence and celebrity in 2024 that nobody was really sure if he was dead or not for a while.
You couldn't even find a proper obituary easily.
It took a while. But yeah, thanks to our amazing patrons. One in particular.
You missed the chance to do the obituary.
There's your obituary.
Oh, damn it.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, it's there in spirit. So
it was an obituary on the American Renaissance website.
Yeah,
where they love him, right?
Yeah, he's American Renaissance. Their like intellectual genealogy, if you want to call it that, isn't exclusively like centered on Pearson. I think, but he was respected there, of course. And the guy that wrote that obituary, not Jared Taylor, but it was just some fucking guy that was part of that scene. It was kind of a lonely obituary. It was like, I knew this guy, you know, he wasn't a racist. Like none of us here on American Renaissance are, you know, and he really exemplified scholarship.
He wrote how he was the last civil man.
The last civilized man? Yeah.
Civil and civilized was used both in a lot.
That's right.
And then one of the first commentaries there is how it's all about civility, how it lacks today. And someone said like, so an opposite of a black American or something like that. So totally not racist group of people.
I think the obituary comment section is a genre that's very underappreciated.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
it's up there with my favorite thing, which is reading Google reviews of like religious sites.
Yeah.
Like famous religious sites.
Well, in a way, an obituary comment section is sort of the Google reviews for a human being, ultimately.
Yeah.
You know? What a great society we've built.
Indeed.
Very civilized. Are we?
And I should mention before we start this episode that this is very timely.
Oh?
Because there was this recent study that Hope Not Hate just released that many of you have sent us.
Thank you.
And Indeed was also on The Guardian and all that stuff investigating the race science networks that are being funded by tech billionaires, or but it's not billionaires, rich tech people.
Yeah.
So this is still going on today.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very much the legacy of this Pearson.
Yeah, among
thought.
Many others, but I think
this is like more Pioneer Fund.
Oh yeah. So Pioneer Fund is, that's like the big Pioneer Fund helped fund Pearson. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
right.
Everyone is secondary to Pioneer Fund. We don't have a Pioneer Fund episode at this point, but probably we'll have to at some point.
I talked about it a little bit.
We talked about it in your eugenics episodes. It's part of this. Was I think maybe a part of our MAR Barker look, but we haven't honored them with the spotlight just yet. But not true for Roger Pearson here. So where we last left English vampire and Nazi anthropologist Roger Pearson, he was making his big move from the old imperial core to the new one. That's right, straight from London to the American South. I guess that's the invisible empire.
Yeah.
There. But to be fair, the only reason I think that he was there for the invisible empire is just because he started hanging out with guys from it who have like white hoods and robes hidden away in their rumpus rooms and all that,
So this isn't just a miscategorization of the entire South as being like a racist, Klan-ridden shithole. He actually went there to become friends with Klansmen.
I would even go so far as to say he went there because it was a racist, Klan-ridden shithole in 1965.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So
I'm just saying he did go specifically because of the good Klan people that he would become friends.
Yeah, and he wasn't the only Brit to do it.
Right.
Apparently,
I think
the American
thing,
South
right?
was sort of like a safari for British racists. But I'm ahead of myself there. We discussed his blossoming bosom buddyhood with Willis Turdshine Carto, and how Pearson not only published a few texts through Carto's Noontide Press, but also merged his Northern League journal, Northern World, with a minor Carto publication to create Western Destiny, which Pearson himself led for a time. He was also a member of the Eugenics Society, which he would eventually become the president of in the 1970s. But this episode's not so much about his thoughts and ideas as the last one was. We learned about his eugenics background. This is about how he became the darling of the new right and how he lost that status. Yeah.
The new right, meaning
the old right.
Okay.
From the 80s, 70s.
So like Reagan.
Weyrich, Reagan, that whole fucking scene.
So not the European new right, like Alain de Benoit and those people.
No. All right, so...
This is America, Ray.
Although, they're not disconnected either,
Sure.
All right, so what do we got? Meanwhile, while Roger Pearson was kind of making his way to the States, there's a group of Chinese and Korean anti-communists who turned their Asian anti-communist league into a big old world anti-communist league. The Wackle. From the Ackle to the Wackle.
Now, I think we've mentioned Wackle many times before, but especially last arc.
I believe the longest we spent on them, which wasn't very long at all, was probably when we did the TFP, Tradition, Family, and Property, because in the 80s, fucking Plinio Correa de Oliveira would host it in Rio.
Well, also some of the Ustashama Greys were connected.
Of course.
Right. So they came up, I think, in the Croatian Resistance Movement episodes.
That is true. And also then we definitely talked about them when we discussed Intermarium, because the anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations is also an affiliate of Wackle. Well, this humble global reactionary international would catch the eye of Lil Raji Hamface Pearson in about a decade, perhaps culminating in his proudest moment, as well as the start of his decade-long fall from grace throughout the 80s. But we'll check in on all those developments in a little bit. Raji, when he moves to the U.S. in the 60s, is busy working on his character, Stefan Langton. That's Stephan Langton, an avatar he'd invented for himself to publish some of his less subtle texts, including deep Bircher stuff about America being a republic, as well as becoming the editor of The New Patriot, a flash in the periodical pan, which burned through about a year's worth of paper conducting a, quote, responsible but penetrating inquiry into every aspect of the Jewish question. With titles like Zionists and the Plot Against South Africa and Early Jews and the Rise of Jewish Money Power.
Wait, Zionists and the Plot Against South Africa, I saw somewhere else.
That you might have seen it in
a Carto thing? This is affiliated with Carto, no?
Because Stephen Langton was also writing for Carto.
Right, okay.
So he also wrote Swindlers of the Crematoria. I bet that's a classy one.
Oh, yeah. That sounds...
Of course, Roger Pearson remained deeply opposed to anti-Semitism and racism throughout his career.
So he's a Holocaust revisionist as well, huh?
No, his website says that he's not.
Okay.
Stefan Langton, however, a total bare-ass Nazi whose books were distributed by National States Rights Party and reprinted in the Thunderbolt, different story than Raji, right? So Stefan was the Nazi, not Raji.
This is also like in Carto's early days, he had a pseudonym that he would write some of the more,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the PhD one.
Yes.
He had a PhD as a part of the pseudonym.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Bold. All right. So Raji, playing this guy Stefan here, worked closely with Jack TENE, a California state senator who for over a decade had chaired their state HUAC committee. So Raji, as soon as he gets to the U.S., he's basically already in deep with the deep end of American anti-communism.
Right.
That's why he's fucking there. I'm sorry to say I don't know the specifics of Roger Pearson's hiring at the University of Southern Mississippi in 1967, but he quickly dug in. And when he started as an assistant professor, he had not yet obtained his doctorate, which he got from University College London a year or two later. But already in 1971, he was a full professor at the University of Southern Mississippi and acted as chair for the Department of Anthropology and Sociology. And in that position, he presided over the merging of the philosophy and religion departments under his own department. And he began wiping out the non-tenured faculty there. Apparently kind of at random. Like nobody ever claims that he targeted faculty to get rid of. He was just like, you don't have tenure, scoot. Because the point of this was not so much to censor the work of these academics. The point was to clear up space so that his friends can join. So while actual anthropologists were getting canned from the anthropology department, Pearson hires people like Donald Swann, a neo-Nazi convicted felon who does not have a graduate degree whatsoever, but had a very large library about race science, apparently, which Pearson ended up buying with a grant from the Pioneer Fund in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. He also hired this guy, Robert Kuttner, a biologist with no background whatsoever in anthropology or sociology or religion or philosophy, who had previously worked with Bill Shockley. This is a Nobel Prize winning co-inventor of the transistor, as well as eugenicist, who actually recommended this guy Kuttner to Pearson. So even the pro-segregationist dean of arts and sciences there at the university, a guy named Claude Fique, accused Pearson of exploiting, quote, his post as an academic facade to bring in equal-minded fanatics.
Oh, okay.
So that's what Pearson was up to when he was working at the University of Southern Mississippi. He was just canning people and hiring Nazis.
If you sack an anthropologist and hire a Nazi without any kind of degree, that's pretty extreme.
That's generally frowned upon in academia, even in some more questionable institutions.
Yeah. Well, while he was chair of the department, Lil Raji invited Enoch Powell, hot off his Rivers of Blood speech in the UK, stirring up anti-immigrant violence there, to do a speaking tour of Mississippi and Louisiana that Pearson organized himself. This included lectures to faculty at Hattiesburg and New Orleans and fun little meet and greet luncheons with white citizens councils. This is the last of them too, This was incidentally only a year after Mississippi was dragged into general desegregation. So the citizens councils were defeated. That's 1971, by the way.
Yeah.
When Mississippi was fine. Amazing. Now this is especially interesting because at this point, Enoch Powell had distanced himself from similar organizations in the UK. This is when they were kind of cleaning up and trying to put on a political face. But a lot of these guys would come to the American South to just Nazi out. You know how like the British people use like Prague for that, or Budapest or whatever. Like
for the stag do's.
Stag do's, they just freak the fuck out. So British Nazis, the American South was their stag do.
They go to Mississippi and hang out with like dudes from the League of the South.
Yes,
and, like imagine what it would be like for them to own a plantation.
League of the South. So I was curious. We were wondering last time if he was at University of Southern Mississippi. He was not. That story I forgot is so much worse. That fucking guy that started League of the South was a teacher at a historically black college in Alabama.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
That's a darknose we're not hitting yet, but I think he's on the chopping block. But he's post Pearson. He's later in history here. So I mean, like. Whatever, like Pearson was basically a ticket booth operator to a racist theme park for British like racists, because they've been feeling a bit bitter over there. They've been feeling down. They've been feeling boxed in since the UK dropped South Africa from the Commonwealth about 10 years prior, and for them, the US was definitely now the home of the free for vampires who wanted to drop the N-bomb. Pearson claimed Powell's lecture to the Citizens' Councils
would greatly raise their own morale and would be of definite value as they are influential in their own part of the world.
Yeah. Powell was, by the way, he was a Tory. He was never officially connected to any like National Front type of group or anything. He was just a conservative who decided a member of the Conservative Party, a Tory who decided he will do racist politics.
Yeah, he's a bit like Pearson's counterpart in some ways. In that sphere, because Pearson's now going to try to pull an Enoch Powell, right, on the American conservative movement. It's also telling that despite Pearson's self-image as an academic, he spent less time in academia than even I did. And I was in and out like relatively quickly.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. He left USM after 3 short years of fucking the whole thing up and moved to Montana College of Mineral Science and Technology before immediately quitting to found the Institute for the Study of Man with grants from the Pioneer Fund in 1975. And this is at a time when it wasn't that hard to become a tenured professor. Yeah. Like, it's not like now. Like, now you're an assistant professor till you're like 70, you know? Like, you just don't get it anymore. This is at a time when they were just giving this shit out, you know? And this dude was in it for a total of 4 years, maybe?
He didn't maintain like a lifelong... for some reason, just reading over his, wiki before we started this, I thought that he was just at the University of Southern Mississippi.
He was straight up.
He was there for 3 years.
He was straight up out of like academia, the like institution, the we'll say like the normal institutions, not like the background ones, you know, not like the funders and the ideological like substructure of it, but like he stopped teaching. He didn't have classes. He didn't hold lectures. He would publish a mix. He would publish now, and actually, he wasn't really publishing anthropological texts as much either. Like he would do one every once in a while, but he's mostly focused on the race science.
Yeah,
and organizing.
Last time we talked about him, I mentioned that he had this connection with the archaeologist Maria Gimbutas through this institute that you mentioned.
I'll tell you about that right now.
Yeah, I just want to, and also I guess you will talk about the journal they started together.
Yeah.
I mentioned that, and she's a kind of a feminist icon to some feminists, I think. And when I mentioned that, someone on Twitter wrote how they are glad that we discovered the connection between the goddess movement and Nazism. Mm-hmm. And I actually don't know anything about it. So if anyone listening knows, I would like to know more what the connection is.
I mean, we're glad we discovered it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big surprise.
Yeah.
So I guess just to add to that, so that happens in 73. In 73, Pearson founds the Journal of Indo-European Studies, that Ray just referenced. The editorial board of it was Roger Pearson, Maria Gimbutas, this guy Edgar Ghislaine Charles Polomé, who was a pretty important philologist who escaped the fall of the Belgian Congo. And had a long, illustrious career in his field, as well as Raimo Aulis Antila, a Finnish linguist who waged war against Chomsky's linguistics and died last year, so Chomsky wins. I wonder if Chomsky was hanging on just for that guy to fucking die. This journal continues, though I wonder about the field itself. that the journal is based in.
Mhm.
I'd like to hear from people closer to the Indo-European studies field. I was wondering if maybe we could get Kemal to chime in on the Patreon comments here if we promise him chikufta or something. You know what I should add here? This is a side note. So since Wackel's going to kick in pretty soon, the World Anti-Communist League is going to be a big part of the story. At this time, journalists following Wackel, the World Anti-Communist League, are reporting that it's becoming increasingly, they consider it infiltrated by openly fascistic groups. And even the Asian Anti-Communist League seemed a bit wary of Wackel's direction under Los Tecos, which is a group that we're just kind of learning about now.
It comes from like a Mexican anti-communist student movement.
There we go. Yeah. My understanding is that they're like an armed version of Turning Point USA in the 70s in Mexican universities.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to the kinds of armed anti-communist student movements you had throughout Latin America. I remember we talked about some of the ones like in Argentina.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, Wackel is basically under their leadership for a minute, and the Asian part of Wackel is worried. The founding part at least they claim to be, but they're the ones that are responsible for the Tecos being in that position in the first place. So fuck knows. Anyway, so Pearson leaves University of Southern Mississippi in 1974 and went moving to Montana. That year, just as a fun aside or a foothold, that was the same year that Seymour Hersh kicked Angleton and the old family jewels, and people started wondering if the CIA and the government were the baddies the whole time, So this is a turning point in the public's view of these backdoor dealings of the deep state. But we'll see Jimmy again soon. Anyway, Roger gets bored in Montana with nothing to listen to at night except his own crippling stupidity.
I mean, you got bored at like the University of Mineral Extraction of Montana or something.
Yes.
What school is this?
Yeah. So he decides to move his mottled pink ass to Washington, D.C., the white chocolate city, as we would call it today, I think. The year is 1975, and baby boy Raji is hustling. Being a ham-faced English gentleman, he, of course, becomes the founder and president of the Council of American Affairs. And this is from the Anderson's book, Inside the League. The council is typical of many backroom councils and organizations operating in the nation's capital that solicit funds and sell subscriptions for a wide variety of causes and publications using different names and post office boxes, but all emanating from a single entity. From his office just off Logan Circle, Pearson not only accepts funds for the Council on American Affairs, but also peddles the Mankind Quarterly, the Journal of Social, Political, and Economic Studies, and the Journal of Indo-European Studies. These are all Pearson things, which they call here a highly technical linguistic quarterly. Besides being a means to keep himself financially solvent in the mid-1970s, the Council on American Affairs gave Pearson the opportunity to collaborate with leaders of the New Right and elicit the support of conservative congressmen and senators. In short order, he was on the editorial board of the Heritage Foundation, the Foreign Policy Research Institute, the American Security Council. Senators Jake Garn from Utah and Carl T. Curtis from Nebraska wrote articles for monographs published by Pearson's council. Senator Jesse Helms and Representative Jack Kemp and Philip Crane contributed to the Journal of Social and Political Studies, which was later renamed the Journal of Social, Political, and Economic Studies in 1980, which, as we discussed in the last episode, in like the 2000s was basically just fucking Nazis writing on it. Like it's yeah. But at this time, the whole New Right's in on Pearson. They love this guy. So it's around this time that he founds the Institute for the Study of Man, which would begin with some academic legitimacy at first, but as the 70s turned into the 80s, it quickly became a marginal fascist rag that really only Nazis who wanted to be seen smart took seriously. The same goes with the Journal of Social and Political Economic Studies, which actually had its last issue in 2023.
Wow.
But their trash-looking 90s website is still up for you to peruse. But in the mid-1970s, Pearson is high on the hog. He's even placed on the editorial board of the Heritage Foundation, contributes to their paper regularly throughout 1977, wow. And in the Heritage Foundation goons, in turn, contribute to Pearson's crypto-Nazi journals. And they're all writing for each other. Speaking of that journal, one of his co-editors for the Journal of Social, Political, and Economic Studies was none other than James Jesus Angleton, who was at that point the former deputy director for counterintelligence. Now, you may recall that Angleton received orders from the same creepy front orders, as in honors orders. You know what I mean? Like you get orders from this or that order.
The Order of Nine Angles,
for instance.
But you said that he was a contributor, right?
He was a fucking co-editor.
Co-editor.
I mean, he's like deep in the like. These are handpicked people by Pearson that are responsible for handling the ideological structure of this journal. You know, so you may recall that Angleton received orders from the same creepy front group that one of Pearson's early benefactors, Nazi Prince Bernhard of the Bilderberg Group, happened to be a core member of. It's possible that that's how they were connected, maybe through Robert Geyer, possibly. This, you know, these orders kind of work like that. Although Robert Geyer, that was, by the way, in the last episode, that was that British Strasserist guy that was deep in eugenics, race science, stuff like this. Right. He started the Northern League with Pearson and all that. Robert Geyer in this
Is
time.
he the guy who was friends with Yockey originally? Is that the guy?
That was... no, it wasn't
Okay.
Geyer. Oh my God, I can't think of who that was. We did talk about some other people connected to Yockey last time. This guy... where are we? Okay, Robert Geyer also goes to the theme park called Dixieland around this time and is made honorary lieutenant colonel and aide de camp to the ultra-racist governor of Georgia, Lester Maddox, as well as whatever the governor of Alabama was at that time. Wow. That's the kind of shit going on with these British racists in the South at this time.
They're just going down there receiving
honors and
getting honors.
Yeah. yes. But Lester Maddox. That's right. I'd like to think that the League of the South guy, Michael Collins, that's his name, Michael Collins.
Yes.
Maybe he met him there, you know, as a young man. So maybe he saw Geyer getting honors or something and inspired him to work at the fucking HBCU. Ugh, man, nightmare. So anyway, Jimmy wasn't the only spy on the board of this. That's Jimmy Angleton on the board of this Journal of International.
Jimmy Jesus
Angleton's. Yeah. Wasn't the only one on the board of this journal. Sorry. Hold on. I'm a bit confused. Okay. The journal that Angleton was on, that was Pearson's journal out of the Council on American Affairs. That was called the Journal of International Relations. So there was two journals.
Okay.
It published at this time. Angleton was on the Journal of International Relations one.
Yeah.
That's where he was the co-editor.
That seems appropriate.
He worked with a retired Air Force general from the political military covert ops branch of the Air Force named Robert Richardson III. So as Rob Richardson was writing for Pearson's Journal of International Relations, he was also at that same fucking time helping covert gun running ops in Libya and like smuggling explosives and stuff like that. He'd also be part of Security and Intelligence Fund, which is also an Angleton thing, and the Coalition for Peace Through Strength, both outgrowths of this Council on American Affairs that Pearson was leading. That's all according to a article from the time that I will talk about very soon. Because, unbeknownst to Raji, his career was about to peak.
So you'd have to hang on for another like 50 years or something, however long you live.
yeah, basically, yeah. He's gonna have like 2 great years and then like 10 increasingly less great years until finally everyone seems to forget who he is, except the Nazis. So the Council on American Affairs wasn't merely another fashy DC office like the Liberty Lobby. It was actually destined to be the new American chapter of the World Anti-Communist League. This is after like the Moonies were on the outs, for instance. Between 1975 and 1980, the Council on American Affairs churned out all sorts of shit, from anti-union propaganda to defenses for a one-party dictatorship in Formosa, Taiwan. Hints of Revelo in there somehow. In 1978, Pearson was made president of WACL itself. But Raji was about to find out that he had flown way too close to the sun there. Nazis are not built for light, Ray. And the longest surviving ones in the US, they find a niche, they dig in like fucking ticks, And that's how they survive. But Pearson wanted to fly with the big birds. He wanted the honors and titles that he felt he was owed by nature. So again, I'm going to indulge in a relatively long excerpt from the book Inside the League, just because there's a lot of names and groups in here, and I am going to fuck it up.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just give you a pretty decent excerpt here from Inside the League, just so you can get a sense of like the scene that Pearson is rising in. When Pearson looked at the World Anti-Communist League in 1976, he saw a strong international federation, with one major exception. The Latin American affiliates were firmly controlled by the Tecos of Mexico. The Australian and South African chapters were composed of historical revisionists, anti-Semites, and Eastern European émigrés drawn largely from the Romanian Iron Guard and the Croatian Ustasha. The Eastern Europeans, that is not the Australians, but the ones still in Eastern Europe, under the anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations umbrella, had not swayed from the course. The Asian delegation were primarily government ministers and high military officers from their respective anti-communist governments who could not be touched anyway, since they were the League's founders. Where Pearson saw the weak link was in Western Europe. There, the chapters were run by prominent mainstream conservatives, some of whom had fought against the Nazis during World War II. They were clearly the odd man out, and Pearson set about planning their replacement with, quote, true anti-communists. Pearson saw in the League the chance to close the circle, to unite the neo-Nazis of Europe under the banner of the World Anti-Communist League, which he had failed to do 15 years earlier with the Northern League. As head of the new American chapter of the League, Pearson immediately reshaped the European affiliates. He turned not only to his old cohorts in the Northern League, but also to those who fell under the leadership of an aging Swedish fascist named Per Engdahl. According to a confidential internal League document, Engdahl is the great old man of Swedish and European fascist ideology. He first belonged to Sweden's fascist struggle organization, and then he held positions in various fascist and pro-Nazi organizations and political mini-parties during the 1930s and 1940s. He was also the co-author of a book, Germany Fighting, that has a swastika emblazoned on its cover and features a photo of Hitler on the inside page. Oh. More importantly, in 1950, Engdahl had joined forces with Giorgio Almirante, the leader of Italy's fascist party, Italian Social Movement, that's a MSI, to form the European Social Movement, a fascist federation with chapters throughout Western Europe. Known by its German acronym ESB, the European Social Movement was probably the largest European ultra-right union operating after the end of World War II, where it reached into 12 countries. The head of the British chapter was Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British National Front. He had attired his followers in Nazi-style uniforms and urged peace with Hitler during the war. The Hungarians in exile were represented by the Hungarist movement of Arpad Henny, the second in command of the 1944 Hungarian government that had seen to the liquidation of over 500,000 of the nation's Jews. The German chapter was led by Karl-Hans Priester, a former SS officer and former press and propaganda chief of the Hitler Youth. Austria was represented by Wilhelm Landig, a former SS officer with cultural interests, according to Per Engdahl. This is the whackle that Pearson inherited, right? But he wants to step it up with these like European social movement guys, right? And bring in the true anti-communist forces, all the SS guys and people named Arpad. But here's the thing: at the 10th Wackel Conference hosted by Pearson in 1978, a Wall Street Journal reporter, this is in DC, I believe, by the way, a Wall Street Journal reporter named Paul Valentine, love it, was sticking his Lugenpresse nose into their fancy fascist fete. You see, Pearson's favorite child was not, in fact, the U.S. chapter of Wackel, but his new Euro Wackel, which he pieced together from the applications of 17 European fascist groups, including, of course, all these XS officers and stuff like we talked about before. Many of these applicants, though, were actually like groups in the sense that like the O9A has Nexians, you know what I mean? Like one or two guys, maybe. Sometimes one guy would be three different groups. That kind of thing was definitely going on. But Pearson's first and I think only Wackel conference was essentially a Euro-fascist debutante ball.
Okay.
I'm going to take you there now.
Announcing young Senator Jake Gahn, who would become the first politician in space in the 80s, and his Senate colleague from Idaho, James McClure. Nice to see some upstanding conservatives taking the initiative against the Red Menace. And who is that shout of espresso behind our strapping senators? Why, if it isn't the lovely Giorgio Almirante of the Movimento Sociale Italiano Destra. What a mouthful, much like spaghetti. Those who know and love our Giorgio just call him the MSI. And what a year they're having. 50 senators and deputies in the Italian parliament led by former black shirt and Mussolini underling, Giorgio Almirante himself. Truly the belle of this ball. And I do believe that's Raimundo Guerrero there. This dignified Guadalajaran professor moonlights as editor of Mexico's preeminent Holocaust-denying publication. Is that blue cheese I smell? Must be Nouvelle École, some of France's classiest race scientists on the Parisian scene. Mon Dieu. And who is that they're chatting with? Yes, this is real. That's none other than William Luther Pierce III. One can only imagine what those great minds must be discussing together. Perhaps Pierce is explaining why he's here, since he's neither a delegate nor an observer. But nonetheless, there they are. Nouvelle École and William Luther Pierce III just having a fucking chat. Moving on, we have Ivor Benson, South African contributing editor of American Mercury. Love that accent. And those creaking, popping joints can only be Emery Graves. Sorry, I like that he's a skeleton. Yes. And those creaking, popping joints can only be Emery Greaves, an early stalwart of white citizens' councils in Mississippi years back. Boy, those were wild times. And ooh, a deep cut indeed just sashayed in the form of Eric D. Butler, famous for his in-depth analysis of protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'd bet you anything he drove in here in a Ford. Oh, that cool desert breeze behind him? In fact, about 25% behind everyone here is a former Saudi Arabian cabinet minister, Sheikh Ahmed Salah Jamjoon, turned general manager of his Saudi Arabian heavy equipment company. Yes. And, of course, our master of ceremonies, Roger Pearson, presiding over the conference as president of the Council on American Affairs, and his stunning assistant, former AMP stormtrooper Earl Thomas.
Damn, that's it.
Excellent.
Woo! Yeah. So what a guest list. What a guest list to the debutante ball.
Last time you mentioned that he had his assistant who was ANP member.
That's him.
But we don't know much about him. I think I tried to find things on him on the internet, but couldn't. But yeah, maybe I'll check one of my AMP books.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think? A pretty good guest list?
That's a pretty strong guest list.
Yeah, he showed up, right? This is Pearson's first conference. Kind of the last one he would attend as well, but his first of two to set up. And he was, And so as expected, like Liberty Lobby was there because they were helping Pearson organize the whole shindig. And copies of Spotlight were easy to find, etc.
What year is this?
This is 1978.
So William Pierce is affiliated with what at that time?
William, that's what's unclear here. Like the journalist was like, what the fuck is he doing there? He's not on the list, but he was hanging out for most of the journalists.
But National Alliance already existed, right?
Yeah. But he was hanging out with Nouvelle École, the French guys. That was his buddies, his conference friends, were these French fucking Nazis. Here's the funny thing, though, is that a less welcome addition there was the fucking National States Rights Party, who were tabling Thunderbolt in the conference. So Pearson saw them and walked up to them and had a very friendly talk with them while the Washington Post, reporter, was there shadowing him. Pearson gently took aside these NSRP guys and said this, apparently.
Not that I'm not sympathetic with what you're doing, but don't embarrass me and cut my throat. But give my regards to Ed Fields.
Is what the reporter said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And also not in attendance, despite Pearson's adoration of Robert Welch back when he was still writing as Stefan Langston, was the John Birch Society. once a staple of the scene, nowhere to be seen now. Neither was Lee Edwards' American Council for World Freedom. I think that was Mooney Linked, actually, who had left when Pearson joined, when complaints began to surface about the rising anti-Semitism in the League. Rub some of these other conservatives the wrong way.
The rising anti-Semitism.
Yeah, buddy.
How do you feel when you see how all of our guys are friends, like Ed Fields and Roger Pearson?
They're all hanging out with fucking like Saudi fucking finance ministers and shit. Like it's a crazy fucking scene. And Roger Pearson is like bringing in the new fashy Euro groups as well.
The Saudi guy is somebody involved in construction too?
Yeah. Construction equipment, I think, was the firm. So all of this comes out in a Washington Post article in 1978 titled "The Fascist Spectre Behind the World Anti-Red League," with Roger Pearson himself getting very special attention by the author Paul Valentine. He was a star, and that wasn't great for the fascists trying to mainstream their own shit in the Republican Party. He was too bright a star. You'd think a guy who looks like, fucking Dumbledore would be a little smarter than George Lincoln Rockwell, but he couldn't not be himself ultimately and had to have 100 fucking Nazis prancing around in front of a WAPO journalist.
Right.
Although,
I mean, that's also kind of like, wow, stunning revelation that the World Anti-Communist League is chock full of Nazis.
Like they hadn't hit full Nazi clip yet. They were just at like half Nazi clip.
Well, I don't know. They had the affiliation with all the collaborationist groups from.
It's true.
From the old country.
It's true.
That had been going on for.
They're embarrassed by neo-Nazis now, but at the same time, they have actual Nazis as chapters in Europe. No.
Yeah. I guess that is the difference.
I mean, like the Ante Pavlich, section. Of,
so it's like it's a generational problem then, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's probably true. Yeah. But when Senator Garn, first politician in space, was asked about this, he says this. We'll certainly ask some questions about all this. We would never lend support to anything like that. Garn was writing in one of his journals regularly, and also, let's see, Senator McClure said,
"Is he the first Nazi in space?"
His reputation was definitely as like kind of a run of the mill libertarian senator type, like early on, free market kind of guy, unclear. This is what Senator McClure's aide said. Any anti-Semites or totalitarians in there would have been really dismayed with Senator McClure's speech because he took a strong human rights position. That'll show him. It's like garlic to crypto Nazis. They can't stand it.
I mean, the whole like anti-Bolshevik world like league was all about using human rights language.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Attention! About face! Forward! March! 1, 2, 3, 4! 1, 2, 3, 4! 1, 2, 3, 4! 1, 2, 3, 4!
All right, so we had a little break and looked up when ABN actually did join Wackel, and it is indeed I think 1968 we saw were the first like tricklings in of Wackel and of ABN affiliated people. So that would have been like maybe a year or 2 years after the initial Wackel conferences. So they were there pretty early.
Yeah.
It is the case. Although they had like a second life in the 80s. Because if you remember from our Intermarium stuff, like who was running ABN was mostly Stetsko and the Ukrainian group.
Yep.
But
and like a kind of cycling cast of other.
But I think it's that Yaroslava switchover in the 80s that sort of revitalized them ultimately. Yeah. But that's a whole different thing. We're here talking about Roger Pearson. So the Heritage Foundation boots Roger Pearson from their editorial board following the WAPO article. Incidentally, Dinesh D'Souza would hold Pearson's position in 1993 in the Heritage Foundation. But here in 78, Pearson is replaced by Stuart Butler, who himself retained a close tie to Pearson, advising him on his journals well into the 1980s. Even worse, Pearson was pressed to resign from Wackel in 1979. I'm sure it was at least some consolation that Nouvelle École made him a member of its Comité du Patronage at that same time. Pearson went out with a bang, however, having already organized the 11th WACL conference in Asunción, Paraguay. Here, Pearson would succeed in bringing together the cream of the fascist crop from Europe, his new Euro-WACL group, and their counterparts. He would help unite them with their counterparts in Latin America. So on his guest list included Blaise Piñar, congressional deputy in Madrid and chief of Fuerza Nueva. Sorry, confused with all these Latins. Fuerza Nueva, his fascist party closely linked to MSI in Italy, with whom he'd formed a miniature fascist league in Europe 2 years prior called Eurodestra, alongside French Force Nouvelle. His followers murdered 5 lawyers that year and executed a schoolgirl with a shot to the head because they thought she might be a leftist. So that guy's there. Most interesting to observers, however, was the presence of Elio Massagrande, deputy chief of Ordine Nuovo, who was wanted at that time by Interpol for fucking robbery and murder in France and Italy. Yet there he was at 11th WACL there.
Okay, but in Paraguay, which is like the place to go for those guys in that exact time period.
That's right. So in fact, the only person missing was Pearson himself, thanks to the demands of the founding Asian section of WACL, ACL, who replaced him with John Singlaub, psychotic co-founder of the CIA and fuckler of Latin America. He founded the United States Council for World Freedom in order to take over the American dictate of WACL. His defenders claim that this was his first step in purging WACL of fascists, supposedly. But Anderson explained the importance of this conference inside the League. They say, while neither Pearson nor the World Anti-Communist League can take total credit for the succession of dirty wars that were to haunt Central America in the following years, the Asunción League conference certainly played a vital role. After 1979, Latin American rightists could increasingly turn to other conduits for money, arms, and technical expertise in unconventional warfare, and political backing for death squad operations against their opposition. So I'm sure we'll get a lot more on that in a planned future arc we have, but for now, for us, it should be interesting enough just to note the easy line here between weirdo fascist gammon vampires, sweaty American neo-Nazis, intelligence agencies, neo-colonial violence, and also regular-ass conservative politics is an extremely short line.
Yeah.
It's it's more of a dot, really. I mean, there's barely 2 degrees of separation here between National Alliance and the CIA in this telling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a small little line. So when people would ask Roger Pearson why he was booted out of WACL, he would claim it was his idea and that he was enraged by the rampant anti-Semitism. Probably from all the Nazis he brought in.
Yeah. I mean, like, who isn't an anti-Semite there? Is there anyone who's not? Like,
maybe some of the Asian chapters are don't care about you so much in Taiwan and South Korea, but
they were also, I think the Asian section was also aware that it was a bad look. They weren't like unaware of the discourse. They just had no stake in it. So they were like, stop.
Yeah.
You know? So Roger had made a lot of friends in the US up to that point, though. And even though they had to put some public distance between themselves and him after this WAPO article, Professor Hamface could still muster whatever support he needed to get his next thing going. So while he retained his position at the Council on American Affairs, he started a nice new respectable group of whitey right-wing fucks feeling increasingly pushed out by post-war scholarship that called themselves the University Professors for Academic Order. It's the Academic New Order, based in Oregon City of Corvallis. And
so they still hadn't learned about saying academic freedom.
Not yet. No, they're building it here. They're really they're really building that up here. Yeah. And also he became a trustee of this rinky-dink school called Benjamin Franklin University, which was a low-profile DC business school founded by the YMCA. And he became a trustee of it just before it got absorbed by George Washington University. So the Academic New Order guys brought Pearson together with officials from New Right leader James Watt's Legal Foundation. Do you have your phones, please, or laptops? Look up James Watt's Wikipedia. Type James Watt's New Right and look at this guy's motherfucking picture. this man's face is just.
Oh, wow.
He's got I don't know. He's a lizard person.
Okay,
sure.
part of that's the glasses.
But it's not a good look. It's not a great look. Let me give you a little bit about what James Watts was about, actually. This motherfucker. Okay, so he was what was his role? He was at this time the U.S. Secretary of the Interior under Ronald Reagan, and stirred up a little bit of controversy in 1983 when he had to resign because he said that a panel that was reviewing some coal leasing policies that he had written, quote, had every kind of mixture. I have a black, I have a woman, 2 Jews, and a cripple, is what he said about the panel and why he couldn't work with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he lost his position after that in 83. But here, in 79, 80, he's doing pretty okay.
Yeah, I mean, being U.S. Secretary of the Interior is... I think qualifies as doing okay.
Doing okay.
Most standards here.
Also under Pearson's presidency of University Professors for Academic Order, they called themselves UPOW, were members of the Mont Pelerin Society, a few hundred Pinochet guiding psychos, including Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek. And those guys. Also, the fucking president of the Heritage Foundation, Edwin Fulner, happened to be the little group's treasurer. You know? It's cream of the crop out here. So this is UPOW still. If we're considering Pearson's lifelong denials of being pro-Nazi, perhaps the most significant member of UPOW was vice president of the pro-Nazi German-American National Conference, who called themselves Dank.
Nice.
D-A-N-K, Dank. His name was Ralph Scott. So this guy and Dank are completely new to me. So I'm happy to let Russ Bellant tell us a little about this fucker. Another board member of UPOW, white supremacist Ralph Scott, a former vice president of DANK, the Nazi apologists, recently became head of UPOW. Scott, who has praised the book Dispossessed Majority, a white supremacist discourse, was named to the Iowa Civil Rights Advisory Commission in 1981 by the Reagan administration. Scott later became chair of the Iowa group, which advises the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, but stepped down in 1988 after an article by Barry Meller in The Nation revealed his background. Scott and Pearson have also received tens of thousands of dollars from the Pioneer Fund, which assists researchers attempting to prove Black inferiority. Pearson's Council for Social and Economic Study distributes Scott's book, Education and Ethnicity, the U.S. Experiment in School Integration. That was the other UPOW guy that was tight with Pearson here, and as Pearson was leading this group. So overall, despite the the WAPO article, the 80s weren't very bad for Pearson either, but they were much quieter than the 70s were. So this is kind of the start of his fall, but it's like a feather fall more than like.
I mean, that's a
ton of
good
bricks.
Cast of characters there.
Mm-hmm.
Milton Friedman.
Oh yeah, yeah. These are the original academic freedom guys. Yeah. So obviously Pearson has a pretty good parachute here. For his fall, Heritage Foundation Director for Domestic Issues Stuart Butler joined the Council of American Affairs Journal, along with right-wing sociologist Ernest van den Haag of National Review fame, and also a member of Heritage's Policy Review Board, who supported William Shockley's voluntary sterilization program proposal. That was the transistor guy. So Pearson continued to publish Mankind Quarterly as well, printing a, quote, cephalic index to identify ideal types among races, even as Stuart Butler and Van den Haag would defend their association with Raji, arguing that he was not racist and just straight up hanging up on reporters who said that he was. Easy solve there.
Hanging up is probably just because he knows he would get himself into trouble if he said anything.
Well, because they would be like, what about all the racist shit? And they're like, nope, that's not. I love it. So,
I mean, why do they even deny that he's a racist? I mean,
because it makes them racist. They can't be racist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another important Pearson associate at the time was attorney for the Institute for the Study of Man, Sam Crutchfield, who was also working for a bunch of Jesse Helms-linked groups, as well as the International Association for the Advancement of Ethnology and Eugenics. But Crutchfield wasn't just an attorney. He was also on Pearson's editorial boards. But he wasn't just an attorney and an editor. He was also he helped set up the Institute for Democracy, Education, and Assistance for Oliver fucking North and Robert Owen to really kickstart the death squad economy in Nicaragua.
Wow.
Jesse Helms, if we recall, said that these Nicaraguan death squads were the purest expression of like free enterprise coming to, which, yeah, fair. But all right. But of course, I skipped over the infamous letter from Ronald Reagan. So that takes us to Pearson, Stan, and good buddy Robert Scheutinger, a free market think tank gunner and early New Right icon. So Scheutinger here somehow got lots of FaceTime with the Gipper himself, with Ronald Reagan, and he used some of it to talk up one of the issues of one of Pearson's journals to this like brain rotted actor. Like from the story that I understand, he basically got Reagan in a room and was like, take a look at the good work that my man Pearson's doing. He was president of WACL. He did all those things. WAPO smeared him, like look at this stuff. Like he's writing with Rob Richardson III and James Jesus Ingleton, all the people you love the most. So Reagan agreed to write Pearson a letter of endorsement on presidential stationery. This is in 1982, well after he was shamed out of WACL by WAPO, of course. That's a fun thing to say. This was the year, by the way, of like E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, Wrath of Khan, Conan the Barbarian, Time Bandits, Blade Runner, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Mad Max 2, and a pointless remake of Cat People, all out in this time at the same time. Fuck yeah. Okay. How do you have time to be this much of a shit?
Yeah.
With that much like going on at the movie theater.
I kind of don't think Pearson, was maybe obviously not into those kinds of movies.
Yeah. It would take the visionary of David Mamet to see the value of George Lucas in spreading Nazism around the world. So let's have a look at Reagan's love letter to Pearson. It's short. But it would keep Pearson going in conservative circles all the way through the 80s. This thing was
getting an endorsement from Reagan in this time is pretty good.
Absolutely.
As good as a guy like Pearson could get.
Shit, if he was still fucking alive, he could probably use it again right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But too bad he's dead. So, you know what? I'm going to give this back to the professor. Professor, are you ready for a Reagan?
Dear Mr. Pearson, thank you for the recent issue of your quarterly, the Journal of Social, Political, and Economic Studies. You are performing a valuable service in bringing to a wide audience the work of leading scholars who are supportive of a free enterprise economy, a firm and consistent foreign policy, and a strong national defense. Your substantial contributions to promoting and upholding those ideals and principles that we value at home and abroad are greatly appreciated. I hope that your efforts continue to receive broad interest and support, and wish you every success in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Ronald Reagan. Okay.
That was really good.
Yeah, quite a good Reagan.
So, in 1986, Robert Pearson was still on the board of trustees of the American Foreign Policy Institute alongside Rob Richardson III, Ambassador Elbridge Durbrow. Sorry, let me do that one again. Elbridge Durbrow is his name. So Rob was Secretary Treasurer and Elbridge Durbrow was the chairman of the American Foreign Policy Institute under Roger Pearson. He was on the board of trustees. Both of these men were tight with Angleton in their shared role running the Security and Intelligence Fund. Rob and Elbridge's Foreign Policy Institute shared offices with John Singlob's American Security Council until 1984. So much for Singlob denazifying the New Right. I mean, they literally shared an address and an office together after he was kicked out of WACL. So Pearson's final success on the New Right was with a short-lived periodical between 1990 and 1992 called Conservative Review, which New Right architect Paul Ryrick's also collapsing Conservative Digest called a very thoughtful and excellent journal. But he quickly followed it up with the most comprehensive 3-book-long argument for eugenics written since the 1940s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was once again a bit much for the New Right, who were like trying to disassociate themselves with their very real Nazi core.
Yeah.
But that seems like the last time anyone who wasn't a straight up Nazi gave a shit about poor Raji. He continued to publish eugenics shit and was clearly an inspiration to groups like American Renaissance, who would become, like we said, one of the very few groups who even seemed to know that he had died this year. Some of his journals continue on to this day. One article from the Journal of Social, Political, and Economic Studies that Pearson wrote in 2018 caught my eye because it had this title. And see if you can tell me why it caught my eye. The title is Weird, that is WYRD. Weird. Word and causality versus providence. So obviously that set me on a David Myatt /fic with Roger Pearson Google search.
So wait, Roger Pearson wrote this?
Yes. But I couldn't find anything connecting.
But you said that he's a pagan.
2018. He is a pagan. There's a lot here that I think Myatt probably likes. But this is 2018. This is way after all of
this. Sounds like Pearson likes Myatt.
It sounds like that, but here's what the actual
2018.
Yeah, you would guess, but this is what the abstract is. So I'll read you the abstract.
The arrival of Middle Eastern monotheism in Europe replaced a prior proto-scientific belief in causality with the teleological concept of divine providence or the will of God. Ancient Greek philosophy was supplanted by a demand that men should stop seeking to understand the nature of the causal forces at work around them, and accept this simply as the work of an all-powerful monotheistic God. A new organized priestly class demanded that men must accept the revealed word of their God without question. The academy, founded by Plato, was ordered closed, as Bertha Philpotts first showed us. Even among the Germanic nations, the concept of word, which postulated an all-pervasive causal force, was replaced by the concept of divine intervention or providence. Europe entered the Dark Ages and remained there until the rediscovery of the writings of pagan classical scholars made possible the Renaissance and the rise of modern science.
It's just about discovering like Aristotle or something, right? Plato. I don't know what the fuck.
Well,
it's like there's nothing in here that's very 09A, sadly.
I mean, it sounds anti-Christian, no?
Well, yeah, but he never made that jump politically. He never did. It's just he just thinks that pagan is the cool thing, and we should at least revitalize it now. I don't know.
We should find that paper.
It's there. I found it. It's there.
Who does he cite, do you see?
I don't know. I was at this point. I could not care anymore. I was just like, if David Myatt is connected to this, I care, but I couldn't find a connection. So
And how did the Europeans rediscover this? Didn't have anything to do with the Muslim world preserving some of that, that other Middle Eastern monotheistic religion.
No, it was the Piltdown man's discovery in Shropshire.
No, I don't know. Remember where? Piltdown. He was discovered in Piltdown, of course. Anyway, that's what he was into about 6 years before he finally died on January 4th, 2024. And there seems to have been confusion about that date, even in his circles. I mean, we weren't even sure if he was dead or not last week.
Yep.
But Pearson's drop, I guess, or fall from his height of conservative respectability may have been a gentle fall, but it was a real fall. They didn't take him around behind the shed, but they let him live out his useless life at the foot of their bed, giving him the occasional scratch behind the ear, as they slowly forgot him, playing instead with younger pups. And finally, in an ending many would find both fitting and deserving, though sadly too late for poor Raji to enjoy. The first new research piece about his life and work to be made after his death was ultimately a snarky, irreverent podcast that made fun of him for tenting his pants over Homo erectus' skull cap and calling him a ham-faced vampire. The end of Roger Pearson.
Oh, well done, Fritz.
And his fucking life.
There's your obituary.
Yeah. I do have some of his responses on his website about the accusations against him.
Ooh, okay.
Sounds like fun. I'll see if anything's worth reading. But in general, his Angleton complaint was that he says he never met him, that they weren't friends, yada, yada. But that may be possible he didn't physically meet him. I'm open to that possibility. But he did specifically put him on the editorial board And
I mean,
they were part of the inner
co-editors
circle
of the same publication.
Yes, you're communicating all the time.
But
And
what was the connection between them then? Like, does he explain like why?
he says there wasn't one. He says all of it's made up.
But he was the co-editor of the journal with him.
Okay, but Pearson doesn't write that part in his denial. He just says, I never met him. Like, he just assumes the thing is like Pearson's webpage is just that. It's just like blatant denials without any.
I mean, okay, he was a geezer that probably didn't understand how the internet works because, like, back in the day, you could just deny a relation with somebody.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
And,
people
you'd have
just
to go to a library where that thing is,
And very few people were actually looking into him in this time.
So he denies any connection with Angleton.
Yeah.
Like that he wasn't a co-editor or whatever.
No, they had no connection.
So he's lying.
Of course he's lying.
Okay.
Yeah. He also says he was never a racist. He was never an anti-Semite. He never had any connections or friends with Nazis. When he talks about that Mengele thing, because a researcher had written that he had boasted that he helped Mengele escape. Raji's argument is like, it couldn't have happened. I was but a wee 17 years old, But that's the thing is that the argument wasn't that he helped Mengele escape. The argument is that he boasted to people that he helped Mengele escape, which Raji does not deny. He just says, that's an absurd claim, which may be true, but you made it, That's kind of his thing. He says that, this is him.
One of the most egregious slanders is to call someone a fascist or a Nazi. Both terms imply totalitarian, despotic, centrally controlled systems, hate politics, and jackboot militarism. Pearson,
he talks about himself in the third person, of course.
Nice.
Pearson never belonged to or advocated any form of totalitarianism, Nazi, fascist, or communist, nor any system of race hatred or extreme politics.
Especially in his book, this is not a democracy. This is a republic.
Yeah. No extreme politics in the conference that he organized at all.
No. And no dictators. No. That's for sure. Yeah. So that kind of thing. He says, he writes about J. Edgar Tolkien here.
Famously, men like Englishman J.R.R. Tolkien.
Did you say J. Edgar Tolkien?
I did. J. Edgar Tolkien. That's his name. The second R, the two R's, it's actually the British used to shorten Edgar into R.R.
Oh, okay. You learn something new every day.
Yeah. People used to call him R.R. Allen Poe before he was Americanized into Edgar. So that's right. Yeah, Hoover too. So
famously, men like Englishman J.R.R. Tolkien were greatly saddened by, among other things, the fratricidal nature of World War I and II, and Pearson's feelings on the topic were typical of this genre of response.
So he's invoking J.R.R. Tolkien.
He also claims that Tolkien sent him or his group a letter of endorsement exactly because of this reason. I guess this was to the League. Because of like we need to become sort of brothers again after these futile wars between kindred people.
These dysgenic wars. These wars that have taken out the flower of our shared race together. The English and the Teutons. Which is, by the way, not spelled Tootins, but it's TOO''NS. It's Teutons.
Teuton.
Yeah.
Racist is another term that is much used as a popular insult to smear anyone who dares to identify breeding populations whose members share identifiable phenotypical characteristics.
I mean, when your response is just because I talk about breeding populations, it's
just because I talk about race science doesn't make me a racist.
Yeah, that's actually his argument.
Advocate for race.
That literally is his argument overall.
It would be interesting, like, to ask these people, like, okay, define a racist. Who is a racist? Like, does that even exist?
Yeah, they will say race hatred. That's what they always say, right?
I don't hate anyone.
Okay, give me an example of someone who is
a racist.
Yeah.
It would be like his friends over at the National States Rights Party.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They go a little far. They're uncouth. Not like my assistant here from the A&P.
Yeah. Good old Raji Pee-Pee. There he is. There he was.
I bet you if you asked him that question, he would say the real racists are.
Oh, yeah.
Stalin.
Well, okay, then we're clear.
Yeah, at least there's something. Yeah. Well, fellas, so illustrious illustrious career, very influential on American New Right politics. Clearly a darling of the Reagan administration, whether or not Reagan fully understood who the fuck he was.
He wrote it in 81. His brain wasn't completely gone yet.
Yeah, he's still an idiot actor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Does Roger Pearson have any like quote unquote important books that he wrote or something like that?
Okay, well, important to whom?
So, well, I mean, to Nazis.
To Nazis, yes.
But
yes,
probably
many.
important to these people that are pursuing race science right now, being supported by the fucking founder of Adult Friend Finder.
I think his 1990s 3-volume eugenics defense is probably the Bible for them right now, for sure. Yeah,
I mean that's the kind of crazy timing of this episode.
Also
that this network of funded race science people is
Stay tuned for next week, patrons.
I guess we'll
talk about it there
as well. Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. Wasn't as long as I thought this episode, No. Again, it always happens. I printed 10 pages for this one and 5 pages for the last one. The last one was 2 hours. This one's an hour and a half. There's no logic to this.
So
it's acausal.
So it goes.
I'm curious about his Angleton connection.
Well, it does. I don't, I think he was just because remember, Willis Carto even ran into him in DC. He was in these right-wing DC circles. And I think Pearson was in that elite circle for that shining moment in his life,
Yeah, sure. But I mean, because this guy connects, he connects William Pierce and Angleton, in some way. So it will be interesting, to know if, Angleton maybe attended one of their meetings that he organized or something like that.
I think that would be interesting to know. But I feel like as far as dirty intelligence wars go, it's probably the John Singlob connection that maybe is more important for Pearson's life, because Pearson was coming in as Angleton was on the outs, and I think, probably Angleton did help him kind of shepherd his way into these new connections, with people like John Singlob. I'm fucking guessing, but the thing is the dude just died. So I don't know what happened to his estate and documents. I'm not sure if some Nazi bought it or if it's just fucking sitting there.
He didn't have a family of any kind, or he didn't have kids.
Probably the American Renaissance people have it
for sure.
They would. I'm sure he donated it to the Pioneer Fund or something, or I don't know what's going on there, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, correspondences.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know. Maybe some new FOIA requests can get accepted now that he's dead. Maybe people who are doing that kind of work might want to focus on Roger a little bit. And we didn't even talk about the fact that a lot of his work in the 70s and 80s was also funded by the fucking Coors family. The big beer empire.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other story.
Which I think we'll be covering soon.
Hopefully. I think we're working on that one now too. Yeah. But Coors beer, it's not only shitty, it's Nazi.
Yeah.
All right. That's right. Bud Light is the woke beer after all.
It's Miller High Life's where it's at.
Oh, there we go. All right, guys. Well,
see you later.
See you on the other side of the paywall for all you truly committed to us here on The Empire Never Ended. But even if you're, just here for the Cro-Mag references, then you're welcome. Yeah. Happy to have you. Hey, listeners, we were just closing the show and thinking about some music to play at the end, and I'm now remembering that I have the perfect track, and I just wanted to introduce this song, Furioso, or The Wilderness of Mirrors by The Knolls, because it's about James Jesus Angleton, and I thought it was appropriate since we invoked his name so many times in this episode, and a big shout out to them for letting us use it here. All right, later, y'all.